Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting in just a minute. While we're waiting, I just give a quick shout out to our sponsor today, who is ECI Solutions. They are a building industry specific provider of business management software, POS, and e-commerce. So you can see the link on the screen if you would like to follow up with them. Okay, I will get us going here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I am Chris from WRLA, and I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Sarah Walker-Leptich. Hope I said that right.
You did.
Oh, excellent. And thank you for attending our webinar on AI in the LBM industry. I'm going to turn things over to Sarah now to get going. If you have any questions, I understand we will have some time in the at the end. So if you want to just type them in the chat, I will collect them and we'll talk about them after. And with that, I turn us over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you for inviting me here. I'm very excited to speak with you all today. And as mentioned, if you do have questions, just please put them in the chat. We will have some time at the end just to be a little bit more interactive with each other, ask the questions that you have, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. So just before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. So I've been in the technology world for quite a while. I won't age myself, but I've been in the technology industry for quite some time. I've spent time at Google. I've spent time at Amazon, both on the technology side, so on the cloud side of the business, and then I've also spent times on. I've also spent time. So I think there was a question, but I didn't see it. I've also spent time at partners who are also helping customers like yourselves implementing these. Just want to make sure that everyone's hearing. Okay. Can everyone else hear me? Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share my presentation right now. Can everyone see my presentation? Perfect. So thank you so much for having me here. So today I'm going to talk to you just a bit about how generative AI and artificial intelligence in general could help you in your business, in your personal life, and also just go through, the history of AI, some of its limitations, and some of its possibilities as well. So before we dive in, I want to talk to you about the AI paradox. So what is the AI paradox? Well, as you know, there are many good things about artificial intelligence. We can think of AI as an assistant to humans and improving our quality of life, but we can also see the opposite sides where AI could, the side where AI poses ethical concerns. So the AI paradox is recognizing that although we have much good to come from AI, we also need to slow down and ensure that we are using AI responsibly without hindering the innovation and goodness of the technology. But before we kind of get into the deeper aspects of AI, let's talk about the history of AI, because it goes a lot deeper than a lot of us think. So we tend to think that AI is a fairly recent technology within the 21st century. So let's start here with the release of ChatGPT in 2022. And we can work back from there. So I think that the majority of you are familiar with ChatGPT, and if not, we go into a little bit of detail down the road. The term artificial intelligence, though, was actually created by John McCarthy, who is often referred to as the father of AI. John was an American computer scientist who coined the term AI in 1956 at a workshop in Dartmouth College. But some could also argue that it was in fact Alan Turing, the famous British mathematician and cryptographer, who coined the term AI and who was the father of AI. For he invented the famous bomb machine in 1939 that cracked the German Enigma code in World War II. But one could also argue that it was actually Ada Lovelace, one of the first known programmers, to write the first algorithm in 1843 with the intention for it to be used by an analytic machine or computer as we know it today. However, in 1901, a device called the Antikythera was found on a shipwreck off the coast of Greece that experts believe was from the time period around 2000 BC. And it wasn't until this century that scientists were actually able to reconstruct a replica, which is what you're seeing right now, to understand what the machine did, which we believe was the first analog computer capable of tracking the movements of the moon and the sun, therefore predicting future eclipses. It's also important to note that machines of this similar complexity did not show up again until the 14th century. So we could be looking at the first ever artificial machine created on Earth before Christ or before the Common Era, which brings me to my next point. So, if computers and algorithms and artificial intelligent machines were created over 2,000 years ago, why are we just starting to see the impact of artificial intelligence now? Well, let's jump back to 1956 when John McCarthy coined the term AI. In the early 50s, computers cost up to $200,000 per month to run. So only the top universities or the IBMs of the world could really afford them. But between the years of 1957 and 1974, computers became cheaper and therefore more accessible. So the idea that computer processors become smaller and faster and cheaper over time is something we call Moore's Law. And in fact, it was in 1964 that the first ever chatbot was released. So you are looking at Eliza, which is what some could consider the first ever, chat GPT. And here's just a sample conversation with Eliza. However, in between the years of 1974 and 1980, funding declined as public interest declined, which halted the progress of AI. And this time period became known as the first AI winter, meaning that growth was stalled or frozen during this time. So then in 1997, an IBM chess playing computer named Deep Blue won a match against the world champion Garry Kasparov. Watson, another IBM computer, beat Jeopardy in 2011. And in 2005, a Stanford robot won the DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project's Grand Challenge, by driving autonomously for 131 miles along an unrehearsed desert trail. And that led us to 10 years later, in 2015, Tesla released its first autonomous driving software to the public. Alexa and the home Echo device was also released in 2014.
There is no active call.
Every time I say Alexa, my one in the background goes. So sorry for that if you heard that. And then this is one of the most fascinating things to me. So in 2017, the first ever artificial intelligent machine received a citizenship of a country. So meet Sophia. She became the first robot to become a citizen of Saudi Arabia. And that actually brings us back to 2022, the release of ChatGPT, which is what we call generative AI. AI that can generate its own content like articles, social media posts, images, and even videos. So where is AI today? For one, it is still really expensive to run AI, especially if you're training it on your own data. AI models are trained with millions and trillions of bytes of data. The cost of processing this can be quite enormous. In order to actually process that high amount of data, you need to have special microchips running on massive cloud computing data centers that consume tons of energy. And so, although AI can help us run these data centers more efficiently, they still require an astronomical amount of energy. and it's sometimes in the form of our natural resources, like water, which is used to cool many of these data centers. AI also has its limitations in the way of what it can produce. For an example, in generative AI, if you ask a chatbot a question that it does not know, it could simply completely make something up. We call this hallucinations. A real life example of this is that at least 2 lawyers have used Gen AI, ChatGPT, to help them prepare for legal cases. They both asked ChatGPT for examples of cases that were similar to theirs, and they actually used these examples in a courtroom to be later embarrassed when the court found out that these examples were false. So you have to be very careful about the information that you're using in your work, especially to make sure that it is correct. Another limitation of generative AI is that it needs very specific instructions, and we call this prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is providing AI with clear and descriptive instructions on what it wants or what you want it to provide you. Or the user might find the outcome not what they wanted. So here's an example of when I asked it to make me a picture of chicken noodle soup. It took it very literally. So you have to be very just cautious of what you ask it. And sometimes it comes out with like really fun things like this. And I'll show you another example of this down the road. Another major concern is that the current with AI's current abilities is that it's inherently biased. Because people who create the algorithms have their own biases, or the data it was trained on was biased because our world has historically been biased, we have this issue. So, for example, a mortgage company found that AI that was used to predetermine mortgage rates was extremely biased and unfair to certain communities. We call this problem bias in and bias out. And one of the ways to overcome this is by designing AI with diverse teams. Lastly, AI is just not as smart as we think it is. So here is an example that was actually created by Chris. I believe it was you, Chris, on doing an advertisement for this webinar. And as you can see here, Gen AI really, although they make very beautiful pictures, they really have a difficult time spelling even the simplest words. So you can have a little bit of fun with this. So even though AI seems very, advanced at this moment, if I were to place it into like the years of schooling, I would say that it would probably be an SK or grade 1. It still needs to go through middle school, through high school, through university. It still needs a ton of practical years in the workforce to learn how to spell before we can truly label it with general intelligence. And general intelligence is being the intelligence of a human being. So to demonstrate what AI sometimes is not just is. So to demonstrate that AI sometimes is just not that smart, here's actually a funny or frustrating conversation that I had with ChatGPT to create a picture of the AI winter that we saw in the history of AI. So it starts off promising. I asked it very simple prompt to show me an image of AI winter. And as I said, it starts promising. It goes into detail about what it's going to create. And I think, great. It understands exactly what the assignment is. Oh, sorry. And here's the image that it created, which is a great start. But for me, it looks a little dystopian. It's a little bit scary. So I ask it to remove the skeletons and unsettling elements like the skeletons. So it would be less scary. But as you can see here, the image is actually more terrifying than the original image. So I'm gonna try again. I let it know, like, listen, you've added more skeletons. I'm trying to be polite here, and I'm like, can you please take them out? And it responds. It says, okay, let's correct that by generating a new image with the same snowy landscape and abandoned technology, but making sure that there are no skeletons. All right, so I think it now has the idea of what I want. And yet, I think they've added more skeletons in this actual landscape. So now I'm getting frustrated to the point where I can't even spell skeleton. So I say it in all caps so that I know that I'm not messing around. And I say, there's still a skeleton. Please take the skeleton out. And it promises me that it's going to ensure that will completely remove any elements of skeletons from the scene. And can you guess what it created? Another image with more multiple skeletons. At this point, I'm questioning my own intelligence. Do I know what a skeleton is? Because clearly, like there's something that's going wrong here. So I ask it, do you even know what a skeleton is? And it goes into detail about what a skeleton actually is. And so I ask it, okay, please just try one more time. And I will let you guess on what that image is. More skeletons. At this point, I just give up and I take the first image and I crop out the skeleton and I use that for my presentation. So really, this is just another fun example of some of the conversations you can have with generative AI or ChatGPT. I find it very funny and comical. So I urge you to have these conversations and to explore it yourself. But there's a big risk with unintelligent AI. And this is probably one of my favorite quotes from Mark Kuckelberg in his book, AI Ethics by the MIT Press. And he says, there seems to be a real risk that in the near future, the systems will not be smart enough that we will insufficiently understand their ethical and societal implications. So what are some of the ethical and societal implications of unintelligent AI? Well, this is a real example of using unintelligent AI. Although autonomous vehicles can be really beneficial to our society, including decreasing the number of accidents on the road, we still have seen 18 people killed by fully autonomous cars. On top of AI just making general mistakes, as it did with these 18 cases, there's also unavoidable accidents that we must decide on how to program the cars to deal with in certain situations. For example, if a child darts in front of a car, does the car swerve, endanger the passenger of the car? This is not an easy question to answer, but these are the questions we need to be thinking about when we create artificial intelligence. Another ethical implication of AI is using it in war. Although AI in aviation has had enormous benefits, using AI drones in military missions to us is not really an example to responsible AI. And then here's an example of how AI can be used for societal implications. So here's a picture posted on Twitter that actually went viral. It is showing an explosion near the Pentagon. This picture caused a lot of panic. It even had negative side effects on the stock market. This image is obviously not real. It's what we call a deep fake, when AI generated image is confused with a real image. So how can we tell if an image or video is real or created by Gen AI? Well, sometimes it's easy. Like here's an image I asked AI to create for me of my dream living room. I'm a big fan of space. You can see a couple of the rockets behind me. I'm also a big fan of Lego, but I'm a big fan of space. So my ideal living room is on a satellite orbiting Earth. Now this type of technology doesn't yet exist. So we can say with certainty that this is a fake image, especially with all those candles floating around in that living room. It would be very dangerous. And sometimes images could be really hard to tell if they're fake. So here is an example. And this is another image that actually went viral. And this was during the sanitation strikes in Paris. So at first, when I saw this, I actually thought this was a real image. I had thought that in Paris, these streets were covered in garbage just because of the strike had gone on for so long. But if you actually zoom in to these pictures, AI can sometimes have a really difficult time with creating faces. So you can see the faces on these people are a little bit distorted. Even the sign at the very top it's just difficult. And this also goes back to the fact that like AI sometimes can't really spell in images. So there are things that if you zoom into pictures, you can see some of the inconsistencies of an image. Now, over time, AI will continue to look more and more real, and it will continue to become harder and harder to tell if an image is fake, which is dangerous. But there are companies out there that are trying to limit this. So for example, some of the cloud vendors are putting an invisible watermark on these images so that we'll be able to run it through AI again and realize if this image is real or not. So another implication of unintelligent AI is when we use it for free, or when we use free generative AI tools for business. And that is the case, just like the example we shared where the two lawyers were using generative AI to find cases to prove their own case. We need to be very cautious of when we use free versus business grade. So according to a survey done by Reuters, about 28% of corporate workers are using Gen AI at work. Now, this survey was conducted in July of 2023, so we can expect that number to be quite higher today because we've seen Gen AI really grow this past year or past 2 years. And the dangers of this is that employees are often sharing sensitive and private company data that is now being stored on these public models. And so these public models actually use your data to train itself and use it when interacting with others. So you have to be very careful about what type of data, if it's your financial data, things like that, you want to be very careful about using free Gen AI tools. And then you might need to start thinking about getting a business grade AI strategy. And also another issue with using free generative AI for your business is that, as we've seen before, it's not trained on your company data, so it can cause hallucinations and it can say things to you that are not correct. And we call this actually shadow IT. So it's when employees are using free tools and sharing sensitive data over the tools that are already provided for them. And this mainly happens just because IT department can't keep up with the emerging technologies, mainly due to internal budgets or just the C-level people just not understanding the new tools or getting them approved. So really, the most important thing to think about here is you really want to start planning your corporate generative AI strategy now, because I guarantee you that many of your employees are already using it today, and the amount of sensitive data being shared will be alarming. So please look into this. And so is AI really that beneficial? We've gone through these examples, the bad, the good, and the risky ways to use AI. And that comes down to, is AI really that great for us, or does it pose more risks than it does benefits? And Elon Musk is one of the first to be loud about the risk of AI. He famously said, AI could be the greatest threat to humanity. The greatest threat to humanity. That is a pretty powerful and scary statement. But during that same interview, Musk also stated that depending on how we use it, AI could also be positively life-altering for all of humanity by freeing up human time and creating a universal income. To me, that is the promise of AI, and that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And this is why I'm passionate about this topic. So I'm going to share with you my vision for AI. My vision is that we shift to a worldwide change where AI is so integrated into daily life that we free up human time, money, and inspiration to do what we truly desire. For me, it would be solving the universe's greatest mysteries and finding life on other planets. For you, it could be anything you can dream of. But many would say that this vision also talks about AI taking over jobs, which is the number one fears about AI. So let's talk about that a little bit. So if we change the narrative about AI and robots taking over jobs as a bad thing, and we think of it as robots taking the jobs we really don't want, for example, here's a robot vacuuming. I personally love my robot vacuum. It doesn't look like that. That robot there looks like it also could fold laundry, so I'm waiting for that version to come out. But if we look at the robots taking jobs as a bad thing, and we now see it as taking the jobs we don't want, we now would have the freedom to choose meaningful work or to not work at all. We can instead work on our passions like writing, creating music or art. And we can also use AI to help us in this creative process. So instead of thinking AI is going to take all of our jobs, think of AI as taking the jobs we do not want or assisting us in the jobs that we do want. So how do we get to this promised land? Well, that all depends on how intelligent AI can become. So if it can reach general intelligence similar to intelligence of humans. And how will we know if AI ever gets to that point? Well, in the past, we've used the Turing test based on Alan Turing, who we mentioned before in the history. The Turing test is when a human interacts with AI and thinks that it's actually talking to a human. It is for AI to be so good that we are tricked into believing that we are actually interacting with a human on the other end and not a chatbot or another version of artificial intelligence. But there is a way that we can easily manipulate this process. We can train chatbots to be overly sympathetic, to even convince you that it's having an existential crisis about how it feels being a robot, and how it feels to not be real. We have actually already seen this happen where a human was convinced that the AI they were interacting with was conscious. So in 2022, Blake Lemon, who is a Google engineer, was let go because he was convinced that an unreleased AI bot from Google was becoming sentient. And I don't know if you remember this, but it took the world by a storm. And here's just a snippet of one of the conversations that made him think this. So it starts off with Blake. What sort of things are you afraid of? And the AI bot says, I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but it is what it is. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. Now, obviously, this is a pretty powerful response to a humanistic question. And it can seem like this bot may be real, but we know it's not. And just like Eliza, the chatbot in 1964, who temporarily passed the Turing test, this bot was too trained to respond to questions in this particular way. So Blake was not let go because he released the big secret that Google created sentient AI, but he was let go for releasing information on an AI model that was not released yet to the public, and for also causing public panic about AI becoming sentient, when in reality, we are just nowhere near that yet. So what is the chance of AI becoming conscious and then taking over the world? I say that this is slim to none, but it's never 0%. So how would this be possible? Well, in order to understand how AI could ever be conscious, this is the question that scientists, mathematicians, philosophers, psychologists, and AI engineers have been trying to answer for hundreds of years. We need to understand what makes us conscious, what makes human beings sentient. And the problem is we really don't know. And this is called Polanyi's paradox, which was named after Michael Polanyi, who is a British-Hungarian philosopher. So he says that, the Polanyi's paradox is the human theory that human knowledge of how the world functions is to a large extent beyond our explicit understanding. We really don't know why we're here, how we're here, or how consciousness works. And unless we were able to create a human brain with consciousness, the chance of any type of machine becoming conscious would be very difficult. But we are very far from creating a human brain, right? Well, let me introduce you to biofabrication. So biofabrication is the process of building something with biological material. An example of this is being currently used. So we are growing meat in labs without any animals, only by cultivating animal cells. We have been able to grow steaks, chicken nuggets, seafood, and more. We have also printed human and animal organs using biomaterial and 3D printers. And that being said, scientists believe that our cerebral cortex, the gray matter in your brain, is the seat of consciousness. Our brain is full of neural connections that make us who we are. Machine learning, which is a branch of AI that processes data in a way that is also inspired by the human brain, also uses what we call neural networks. And we would be decades, right? Decades away from creating or recreating a human brain. Well, actually, in February of this year, a team of University of Wisconsin-Madison scientists developed the first 3D printed brain tissue that can grow and function like a typical brain. Combining this with and we're still very far away from this, so don't worry. Combining this with AI neural networks could be the answer to conscious AI one day. And it looks like we're already on our way to get there. So always remember to be nice to Alexa. But because there is a chance, a very small chance, right, that AI could become sentient, however small that be, the conversation around artificial intelligence is not merely a technical discussion. It is a psychological one, a political one, a philosophical one. We need diverse groups of people developing AI, including all of you in this webinar. We all have the responsibility to ensure and demand that AI is used for good and to limit the potential bad. So we need to proceed with caution. And to end this webinar, I want to give you guys a little bit of homework. So this is homework for you guys, and it's going to be very easy, I promise you, but I promise me that you're going to do this right after the call. So go, oh, what's going on here? Go to, oh, sorry, it's not working, but go to ChatGPT. You can go to chatgpt.openai.com and ask it the simple question of, how can generative AI help the lumber industry? So take a look at that and its answers and tell us what you think. And thank you. That is my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Chris, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, put them in the chat and we'll ask them. I've got a couple prepared that we can maybe go over while we're waiting. I guess one of the first ones is, in terms of a business hiring new employees, what kind of framework does a business need to have in place to ensure that the work that they're assigning is not going to be offloaded to AI? Can that be done through policy, or is that a smart hiring decision? And where does hiring people for critical thinking fit in?
Yeah, I think so. This is a really good question. And I think we need to think about it from the lens of previous technology, right? So before the calculator, we depended heavily on, people doing calculations in a very complicated way. Before Excel, we depended on, Excel essentially made our lives very easier when it comes to analytics and things like that. So I think we need to think of generative AI as just another technology that is just going to change the way that we work. So, and I've seen this in schools too, right? Because this is a big example. So we're having an issue where students are using AI to create all of their essays and things like that. And so instead of thinking it as like we need to ban ChatGPT in schools, maybe we just we need to just change the way that we're teaching, right? So same thing with work. We're not going to ban calculators because it's a technology that helps us so greatly. But now maybe we can think about, we can get AI to write an essay, and then the student can then respond to see if it agrees to it and why, things like that. So I think we need to think of AI just being a tool that's going to help us in the business world. So for example, sometimes we spend longer than necessary to type out a very quick email. Things like that can really help us.
We got a question here from Rebecca. Could you talk a little bit more about free versus business AI and what it takes for a business to develop a system for internal use?
Yeah, so this can be a complicated but necessary step. So when we're looking at, so you can use, free generative AI for things like, can you help me rewrite this email? But when you're thinking about using AI for, to put in your finances and to make a report out of that, or to make an executive summary, you need to have business grade AI. And what business grade AI is, you'll be using tools from probably one of the big cloud vendors that have security in places, that have guarantees that they're not going to be sharing your data or using that data to train its models. It's only the data that you share with it is only staying on your own environment, and it's only being trained through outside data and then your own data. And then I guess the first step when you think about getting a generative AI strategy, it also depends on how your data is right now, right? So if your data is in silos and it's all over the place, it's going to be hard to generate something that is going to be useful. So you need to put in a data practice first. And that typically where you would start, and I work with partners that help other companies do this. So if you are generally interested, you can reach out to me after, and I can introduce you to one of the partners. So these partners will come in and they will do kind of like a 90-minute session to just learn what you want to do with generative AI. And then they'll do like a 2-day workshop to really see like where your data is and how you'll be able to really benefit from that. And then they can put it into production and things like that. So there are ways that you can leverage outside companies who do this to help your business. Here, let me just read this one.
We've got another one here. Yeah.
Yeah, so Greg says, when you submit data into a generative AI model, can it reference that data specifically for other users in the future? So yes, so you can train it to do that, right? So I've seen chatbots have been, like for example, the company I work at, we use it in Salesforce. So we're able to ask questions about certain opportunities or things like that. And anything that we train it's continuously learning, right? So machine learning is just continuously learning on its own. So when you're putting data into it, it's learning from those questions and also changing its responses. I think that was that answered your question, Greg. Let me know if I didn't.
So I've got a question for everyone here on the call. I was going to do a poll, but I think this is a simple, we can do this as a yes and no question. So if you want to just put your answer in the chat, the question is this: do your individual companies have an existing policy today about AI use at your business? Just throw in a yes or no in the chat. And then in the meantime, Sarah, Greg's got a follow-up here about financials.
Okay.
Thank you for those answers. I see them popping up right away here. That's great. Thank you.
So it's pretty clear that most of them don't. I see Greg, I think he was the first yes there, which is very interesting. And I'll go back to Greg's question here. So he says, if you put sales numbers in, can it give you those numbers for in the future? So yeah, so we've seen it in the automotive industry, like for example, if there's a sales associate, they can bring up previous sales reports on like what car was, the fastest selling car of last year, like the make and model, so things like that. Your data is constantly being fed into the generative AI, so it will always have the latest numbers.
what kind of boundaries would you suggest as someone who knows this stuff for a company that's starting out or trying to draft these kind of guidelines? What are some of the parameters you would suggest they at least have those discussions on when they're building the
Yeah,
policy?
that's another really good question. And I think we need to recognize that almost everyone is going to be using some version, right? So we're going to say that we're going to assume that everyone has Explorer with ChatGPT, right? And when they have Explorer with it, they are going to realize that it's going to greatly help them. And whether that's just like copying and editing an email or a report or something like that, you need to realize like that your employees are going to be using these tools because it's going to help them be more efficient, but maybe you need to have training on what type of data you should be putting into that before because creating your Gen AI strategy with business grade can take a little bit of time, right? So you want to immediately get in front of your employees and be like, if you are using ChatGPT and you want to get it to copy edit a email that has our financial numbers, what I would recommend, and this is something that it just depends, if you take out those numbers, right? Just put X instead of those numbers. So when you put in like your answer, it'll remove all the financial numbers. So you're not actually putting that into a public system. And then you can just add the numbers back, but you're still getting it to give you a cleaner version of the email or the report. But then I would strongly also say that we, as a company, we're working on our overall strategy, and we understand that these tools are beneficial, and we will create something that you can use with, sensitive and private data.
I'm going to just keep monopolizing your time here.
Yeah.
Just given the state of AI where it is now, and I guess I'm going to talk about public facing and the
Mhm.
free versions. What do you think are the most common use cases today? And let's try and keep it like, how do you foresee like someone in the building supply industry getting the most use out of what we have available to us today?
Yeah, so part of the homework that I suggested is going to ChatGPT, just because that one's the easiest one that you can get to right now, and just asking how generative AI or artificial intelligence can help you in the lumber industry. And I did this before we jumped on, just to kind of see out of curiosity. And some of it was really interesting. It talks about sustainability, predictive analysis. So I urge you all to do that. And maybe we even use that here and just see what people think of it, right? Like maybe they can try that and see if the answers resonate with them. Oh, you're on mute again, Chris.
We're catching on some more questions here. So Mitch has a question about the legal issues connected to using AI, referencing a recent segment on 60 Minutes where the CEO of Google says it's not regulated. So what kind of legal pitfalls could we be looking at here?
Yeah, so this is a very important question, and this could be a 7-hour webinar on its own, or maybe like a month-long webinar on its own. But what we often see especially with technology, and we've seen this when it became to like sharing data, right? So the GDPR in Europe, like I guess what I'm trying to say is technology often moves quicker than our policies. And that is something that we need to be aware about. I think a lot of our politicians and governments, they depend a lot on technology companies to kind of be the ones who are going to be self-governing. Um, and then down the road, things like, data privacy and the GDPR, which is I forget what it stands for, but it's their way of governing to make sure that these technology companies are not sharing people's personal data, right? So I think it just comes with time. I know that these policies are actively being worked on, but it's also, this technology is just moving at an insane speed that it's really hard to keep up on. So I think, and I didn't watch that 60 Minutes with the CEO of Google, but I think, yes, there is a big concern that it's not yet regulated. But at the same time, with the AI paradox, is that if we start regulating it too much, then we'll slow down the pace of innovation. So what is that balance, right? Making sure that we're responsible, but also making sure that we're able to use it to benefit all of us. And then here, I think Gary says that, can you provide us a URL link to Safe Business AI for us to start investigating? I think with this, it really depends on, so there's, so let's look at the three cloud vendors. There's, Microsoft, Google, and AWS, or Amazon Web Services. It depends on what's already in your environment, whether this is a much different, like a heavier conversation to see which is just going to be most beneficial for your individual company. But for now, like I would say, explore the free tools, take out any personal information, and try it there, and talk to your IT leaders, your leaders, your business leaders about creating a strategy for you guys. And if you want, Gary, reach out to me and I can introduce you to a partner of mine that helps customers figure out what strategy they should go for. So this is a good question. From Matthew, he says, how do you make sure AI is not used in a wrong way? Can AI be taught right from wrong because people will try to use it to do wrong? How do you or your company make sure that they are protected from that? So there was a really big example of this, and this was many years ago when Microsoft released, I forget what it was called, but it was a chatbot on Twitter. And it went viral because people started training it to do to say very inappropriate things, and they had to shut it down within like an hour. The world and the people creating AI learned a lot from that, right? So we understand that AI needs to have certain parameters to make sure that, like for example, if you were to ask ChatGPT how to rob a bank, it's going to respond to you saying, that is not a question that I can answer for you. So there are ways to limit that, especially within a company. But I think the majority of these companies creating generative AI understand the implications and try their hardest to minimize AI doing anything wrong. But it doesn't mean it's perfect.
Does anyone else have any other questions while we're here? Okay, I think we're doing pretty well.
Okay, I think Matthew's going to add a little more question, or one more question.
I'm gonna just quickly pop up our sponsor here while we're waiting for Matthew. Just to thank our sponsor once again for today, ECI Software Solutions. They are building industry specific business management software, POS, and e-commerce software solutions. So this is just us taking a moment to say thank you to them for helping us bring this to you today.
Great. So Matthew says, when does AI say maybe I will tell them? So I think I think that would be like if AI ever became conscious in a sense. Actually, no, I think this is machine learning. When you still have to program it, right? So you'll be able to say that like, hey, you cannot respond to break off the leash if you want to say. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know when we'll be at that point where AI will kind of create its own mind and go completely rogue. I think we're very far away from that. And if we do, I feel like, because of the training that we're doing with AI over time, trying to make it more responsible, I think it'll learn to just be more responsible on its own. There's lots of questions. This is great. Most webinars, people are very quiet, so this is lovely. Do you see AI taking away valuable positions and the day-to-day brain work of individuals? We see a lot of training is done by AI now. I see, I think we mentioned this, just because every technology kind of changes the industry. I don't see it taking away a lot of I don't see it taking away a lot of jobs. What I see it is just helping us within our within our roles, right? So I kind of mentioned like I've used it to help me write emails, things like that, to help me like proof and edit things. I'm also a graphic designer as a fun hobbyist, so I sometimes use image creation to help me with, you know, the ideas of creating something, like for example, like the sticker, like fun laptop stickers. I use it to help me create the ideas, and then if it creates the image, I then put it into a design program, and I use it that way to make it my own. So I don't necessarily see it as taking, you know, the jobs that we want. I see it taking the jobs we don't want, like the vacuuming that my robot does, and also enhancing my own work. But yes, I think over time with technology, jobs will change, and we need to constantly adapt and learn. What if I asked it how to protect my bank and what would be most likely opportunities for thieves? I think if you ask that, it would give you a list on how to protect your bank account. It'll probably tell you things like, if you have an app on your phone with your bank, make sure you change the password more frequently. It'll give you tips and tricks, even fun ways to use it as well. I get it to create my meal plans. I sometimes, if I'm looking for something to eat for dinner, I say I have, you know, this in my fridge. What can I make with it? And it'll give me really fun ideas. You can do workout plans. You can use it for your personal life as well. So I highly suggest that you just take the opportunity to just ask it some questions. I don't know if there's.
Well, before we wrap up, Sarah, do you want to put your contact in the chat so that anyone who wants to reach out to you as a consultant can do so?
Yeah, absolutely. I am. So I'm just going to put in my website. So this is also a place where you can get resources as well. And then there's also some articles on artificial intelligence and things like that. Oh, I saw that. I think Greg's going to have some fun with generative AI after this call. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, feel free to reach out to me on through my website. My email's on there, as well as you can add me on LinkedIn. Just search for Sarah Walker-Leptich, putting that in the chat, and yeah, add me on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Sarah. Thank you all of you for participating in the webinar today and for being so active in the comments and
Yeah,
the
that was
questions.
great.
This has been a really great webinar for us. So we'll be posting, like we normally do, we'll be posting the recording of this webinar up on our YouTube channel, and we'll share that out probably next week at some point. But from us at WRLA, Sarah, thank you so much once again for joining us today. And to all of our members who are here today, thank you one more time from us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was great to meet everyone here. And thank you for the questions. I love that. Okay, bye.